is assisting the broadcaster to increase its viewership and thereby attract additional advertising revenues. And Glendora says, this is just what Mr. Malone did to public access in 18 communities. There is a substantial likelihood, says the Cable Act, that absent the reimposition of such a requirement, additional local broadcast signals will be deleted, repositioned, or not carried. Glendora says, please go back to Glendora's paragraph 10 super. Every other cable TV system in the area, the ADI, the area of dominant influence, found room for the very same must-carry stations, but not one of them murdered system-wide public access to do so. This was Mr. Malone's own private brand of greed, opportunism, law-breaking, defiance of Constitution and statutes, lying to the United States District Judges and to you, the United States Court of Appeals. Nobody else in the SADI committed this crime, only John C. Malone. Citizen, how do you feel today? And the senior citizen says, okay, except for a few twinges in the hinges. And Pat says that he's at the cereal stage where he feels his corns more than he feels his oats. And you know you're getting old when everything hurts and what doesn't hurt doesn't work. And when you try to straighten out the wrinkles in your socks and you find out you aren't wearing any. Lisa Margaret Smith, who is a magistrate in the United States District Court, dismissed Glendora's case against Continental Cablevision for robbing us of our free speech and free press. The program was on every Saturday, and then Continental Cablevision cut it down to 2 Saturdays a month, and Lisa Margaret Smith says that that didn't rob Glendora of free speech and free press. Isn't that a great decision? And you and I have gone through this. It's 130 pages long. This is Glendora's objection to said decision. And we are up to page 107. And Glendora says that it took Lisa Margaret Smith from July 4th, Independence Day, to March the 4th, St. Patrick's Day practically, and it is not respectfully submitted when one lies and covers up and misrepresents and convolutes. And how could she sign such a Stygian paper? Glendora requests Rule 11 Federal Rules of Civil Procedure sanctions on Lisa Margaret Smith, United States Magistrate Judge. Glendora's submissions have been voluminous and they have fallen on deaf ears, plugged with favoritism, bias, prejudice, and self-interest. What a spectacle this is. What a blot on the escutcheon of the United States District Court, Southern District of New York. And never put your trust again in this magistrate. Get her out before she wreaks more havoc. All this information that she is looking for as to damages to Glendora's business and career is in the Glendora versus Malone file, 96 Civ 0140. TCI knew how to get the information out, but amateurs Walsh, Hostetter, Smith do not. Says Smith, copies of the foregoing report and recommendation have been sent to the following: the Honorable Barrington D. Parker, Jr., United States District Judge, and to Glendora, and to Thomas Walsh, the liar, for hire. And Glendora says on page 108 of her objection, and on paragraph 275, at last, she, meaning Lisa Margaret Smith, is silent. And Glendora says she never kept her word on improper restraint of speech. Hear the audio tapes. Quote, no summary judgment, Mr. Walsh, improper restraint of speech. We are on the cutting edge. And now Glendora has a few things of her own to say. Glendora's motion for a TROPI, that's a temporary restraining order preliminary injunction, had time to go through the United States Court of Appeals and into the United States Supreme Court, all within the 8 months it took Lisa Margaret Smith to do her job on this report and recommendation. Let me tell you, in the world, the magistrate system doesn't work. Even without the abuse Lisa Margaret Smith made of it, the magistrate system does not work. A magistrate should never bungle a dispositive motion. An Article III judge should not get a warmed-over, second-hand version on a critical dispositive motion and should not let himself get so far removed from the case that it becomes Herculean to review the record. The dumping of a case by an Article III judge onto a magistrate is patently unfair. These courts are hopeless, folks. These courts are in despicable hands. We've got to get out these bad judges and we've got to get good people in there. Even if the magistrate had been fair, competent, qualified, and true to oath of office, the magistrate system as it is abused today does not work. Again, Glendora calls judicial attention to the audio tape of the last Smith conference when she gave Glendora the shaft again into her puerile responses, totally unfitting a United States magistrate judge and the $33 million courthouse that we bought them. Bear constantly in mind, people, that with her strain to cover up Walsh for the sake of Buddy Galvin, Lisa Margaret Smith went back on her word, given 6 times, improper restraint of speech, articulated since the first conference in November 1995, Election Day, to the last, the week before Memorial Day. Smith had given the Memorial Day Friday date to Glendora against the protests of Walsh and of her Galvin and Rockland staff. It was set in concrete. Yet Galvin called Glenn and robbed her of the Memorial Day Friday. This is how dishonorable they are. It is in the record. Glendora made a protest to being knocked around again and again, and for not keeping one's word. They are low-level people and not qualified for the great United States District Court, Southern District of New York. Get rid of these judges and get us some good judges. Again, everything is in the record. If it has not been stolen by Galvin or other clerks, Glendora found that in Glendora versus Telecommunications, her side had been kept out of the record. Indeed, the record on appeal was submitted to the United States Court of Appeals without Glendora's complaint in it. This is a new crime, keeping only the lies of the judges and the lawyers in the record and keeping out the plainest truth. White-collar crime begets black-robe crime. You cannot expect a magistrate to think clearly and coherently to a decision, and if said magistrate cannot even write a coherent paper without 23 disjointed footnotes. The magistrate's bias and prejudice is staggering on 25 counts at least, but be certain she hits bottom by quoting Rakoff and Jones without Glendora's refutation of same. This is savagely unfair. In other words, she just quotes one side of it, what Rakoff says and what Jones says. She doesn't quote what Glendora says. Also bear in mind the bias engendered in Smith in knowing that T.E. Walsh is a part-time judge in a tiny village in Rockland County, Haverstraw. The fix is in. The fix is in. When Glendora brought up her victories in Bryant and Silverman, L.M. Smith sloughed them off with, "Those cases are not this case." She patently refused to include the good to Glendora in those cases and used the bad against her in her blind prejudice to force the Galvin-Walsh connection. Lisa Margaret Smith does anything Galvin tells her to do. Glendora and Franklin watched Galvin fix the service of papers by a pro se on Yonkers Hospital. We saw Galvin manipulate the whole scene. Galvin handed a copy of the complaint to the pro se and nodded, "Here, serve it on her." That was the lawyer for Yonkers Hospital. We are old court monitors. Lisa Margaret Smith simply does not do her work. Glendora wrote Lisa Margaret Smith. She is the designated magistrate on Glendora versus Magnus, and that Rakoff made an error handing the case over to M.D. Fox. Smith has never answered. Even a follow-up telephone call did not get Smith to do her job. Her 30-page report and recommendation, spelled W-R-E-C-K-O-M-E-N-D-A-T-I-O-N, is way too long, rambling, and ludicrous as schoolgirl. pro se leniency is sacrificed on the altar of bias and prejudice, the fix. By 28 U.S. Code Section 144, Glendora petitions Lisa Margaret Smith recused. She is not fit. This is an ad hominem attack, will be the statement. Well, this report and recommendation is an ad hominem report and recommendation. Read Glendora's complaint. I wrote it better than Lisa Margaret Smith mangled it. We are on page 113. The magistrate system might work if we had a good qualified person as a magistrate. Lisa Margaret Smith's report and recommendation is not a decision, it is an incision. In addition to the bias manufactured by the Galvin-Walsh connection, Lisa Margaret Smith is motivated to get the bad reports about her off TV, or at least 50% of them. Another judge betrays America. So what else is new? Lisa Margaret Smith covered up for Walsh, Hofstadter et al. On the insurance agreements, insurance policies, a basic discovery, and are mandated by Local Rule 46A. But Smith let Walsh hand them in camera and prevented Glendora from seeing them. There is no more sweeping under the rug. But Glendora foiled this by getting the information from the town of Ossining, which loathes Hofstadter et al. As much as Glendora does. And so Lisa Margaret Smith contributes to the anarchy and the deliberation of the Republic. Look at this, folks. One page goes one way, one page goes the other way. I don't know, I ought to tear the page out, I think. Look at this. A Republic, if you can keep it, by Earl Warren. To one of the most important segments of our citizenry, the millions of American mothers, including my wife Nina, whose fondest hope is that their children will be responsible citizens and whose faith in humanity and love of freedom sustain their belief that this will be achieved. That is the wrong quote. What should be in there is when Ben Franklin came out of the Constitutional Convention, a woman standing outside with many others to get the news said, "Well, doctor," speaking to Ben Franklin, "are we going to have a republic or a monarchy?" And said Ben Franklin, "A republic if we can keep it." Ben knew there would be soul sellers down the line like Lisa Margaret Smith. The Article 3 judge has a staff of 2 law clerks, a secretary and a deputy clerk, and a magistrate who is a staff of 3. This is a lot of tax money. Glendora has nobody. Lisa Margaret Smith made a bad record that a newborn has to grow up with. T.E. Walsh did not have to lift a finger. James Galvin did it all for him. Walsh knew he could not win on the law, the facts, and the merit. And that's when he began ingratiating himself with courtroom deputy James Galvin. Lisa Margaret Smith has not told you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. She is not qualified to pick jurors for fairness, for no bias, no prejudice. It is a sham. Glendora cannot be robbed of her 7th Amendment right to jury trial. Rule 38, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, says this right shall be held inviolate. That doesn't mean that you're wearing purple. Smith robbed the jury of its domain and robbed Glendora of discovery to get the facts and covered up for Walsh, Hofstadter on their violations of Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 37A and B. "I don't understand your motion, Glendora," said Lisa Margaret Smith. "Get somebody who can," says Glendora. And the third discovery robbery was denuding Glendora's interrogatories, and that's dictatorship. In addition to the bias and the fix, there is the mean-spirited disease of Lisa Margaret Smith. She acted in bad faith. Glendora should have asked the Second Circuit for a mandamus on Margaret Smith for this 6-month delay, but Glendora was naive enough to hope for the ruling on the facts, the merits, and the law. We're up to page 117. 245,000 people in Belgium marched on the courts last summer. The movement swells here. Glendora will make a public example of the Lisa Margaret Smith report and recommendation. A judge can be sued for violation of civil rights, and these 117 pages constitute the complaint. It is all written. A career is truncated. Where will Walsh and Galvin, to whom L.M. Smith sacrificed all, where will they be when this time comes? The report and recommendation is 30 pages of rationalizations, a psychology term. Lisa Margaret Smith is in violation of Rule 1, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which says, these rules shall be construed and administered to secure the just, speedy, and inexpensive determination of every action. What a sham, folks. Just, speedy, and inexpensive. Paragraph 301. Walsh's next move will be to romance Judge Parker's new law clerks. Maybe Galvin will do it for him. Glendora calls B.D. Parker judicial attention to the crime of Lisa Margaret Smith, using cases against Glendora, Glendora versus Malone, Glendora versus Telecommunications, whose decisions came out after the 60-day limit. If Lisa Margaret Smith had got her report and recommendation done within the 60-day limit, those cases could not have been used against Glendora. So Lisa Margaret Smith's reliance on these cases must be expurgated. Add to this Lisa Margaret Smith's unilateral failure to cite Glendora's refutation of these Rakoff and Jones decisions, are saying it's okay to use a public access channel for commercials, Time Warner versus New York City, Title 47, United States Code, Section 545, and censorship is alive and well in America. The issues Glendora raises in Hofstadter are of national significance. The treatment by Lisa Margaret Smith is a Lilliputian treatment of a Brobdingnagian issue. She gave short shrift to the harm Hofstadter has caused Glendora's marriage, her church, life, her health. She bullied Glendora for 30 pages. Lisa Margaret Smith is in violation 28 U.S. Code, Section 473, the Civil Justice Reform Act of 1990, which says, each U.S. District Court is required to implement a civil justice expense and delay reduction plan that would facilitate deliberate adjudication of civil cases, listen to this folks, on the merits, monitor discovery, improve litigation management, and ensure just, speedy, and inexpensive resolution of civil disputes. Did you see that happening here? No. You saw just the opposite happening here. She should be fired. She failed dismally to rule on the merits and the facts. She failed to monitor discovery. She failed in litigation management. 8 months, July 4th to March 4th, to write an R&R, report and recommendation. She failed to ensure just. She failed to ensure speedy. She failed to ensure inexpensive. Glendora now knows about whom Martin Luther was writing when he said, for still our ancient foe doth seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate, on earth is not his equal. This is a judge who lets God law mix with Alabamans. I'll show you that, folks. The alarm you hear is my watch. That means that I should go on retreat and do meditation. But there's no time for that anymore because the fight is too strong and too heavy, and bad judges with corrupt decisions keep coming. And we have to fight for our country. Lisa Margaret Smith's report and recommendation on March 4th, 1997, 8 months. Stewing is hermetic injustice. It is modus vivendi, Smith, Galvin, Walsh. It is excruciating, turbulent, meandering, and it is strafe. It rapes the ahimsa of the United States District Court. And what happened to Rule 1, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, inexpensive and speedy? Just was gunned down, blindfolded. The law-breaking of Hofstadter through un-American cable systems, the lying of Thomas E. Walsh, the cover-up of James Galvin and of Lisa Margaret Smith have cost Glendora $1,959.92 in print, post, rip-off court stenographers, 900 hours times $250 an hour, which is $225,000 worth of legal labor, 101 TV reports, 3,694 pages, 19 volumes, 1.5 file drawers, 72 mailings, 1 year and 8 months of robbery of due process. This is page 123. Glendora is aware of the fix all over the entire Quaropus courthouse. We bought you for $33 million in February 1996. Bryant crookedly stayed Glendora's trial, Glendora versus Cablevision, February 28, 1996. All these things happened in February 1996. At the same month, Connor robbed Glendora of her defendants, Glendora versus John C. Malone, and dumped her on Fox, February 28, 1996. Rakoff became autistic. Parker did a volte-face on first come, first serve on a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction, February 27, 1996. What's all going on behind the scenes? Justice? The great and wonderful United States of America? No, crookedness. This is hardly coincidental. Wherefore Glendora pleads the Judge Parker Court reject in its entirety the Lisa Margaret Smith report and recommendation. Defendants pay Glendora $298 million in compensatory and punitive damages. The cost of this action be taxed against defendants. Defendants make good all programs deleted since September 1995 through February 1997, either prime time 8 p.m. to 11 or Saturday or Sunday afternoons 1 to 6 p.m. Reassignment to a downtown magistrate, any further relief that is just and proper, dated White Plains, New York, March the 15th, 1997, Anno Domini, yours in truth, Glendora, chat with Glendora. So, my objection to this atrocious mishandling of justice went to Barrington D. Parker. Simultaneously, almost, maybe a couple of days later, Thomas Walsh sends in an objection. My complaint was dismissed on all but one claim, and so Walsh gets 6 claims, or 5, and then he complains about not getting the other claim, and then he says in the alternative he wants Glendora to produce this discovery within 60 days. And then we get a decision from the district court, Barrington D. Parker, and he accepts in its entirety the Lisa Margaret Smith report and recommendation, which was such an atrocious, inadequate, and schoolgirl job. So I object to that. And my objection to that is a Rule 60B motion or 59E that United States District Judge Barrington D. Parker amend or alter his decision to accept the Smith report and recommendation, or to grant me relief from his order. Well, you know, we don't have any judges, big enough people to do that. So naturally, in 2 or 3 days, he denied that and just scribbled at the top of the front page of my Rule 60B motion, denied. So ordered. And how many pages was that? I wrote 22 pages, giving the reasons why I objected to Thomas Walsh objections, and why I objected to Smith's report and recommendation. This is the Rule 60B motion, or 59E. That Glendora objects to Thomas Walsh's objection to the report and recommendation of Lisa Margaret Smith, and this went to Barrington D. Parker. And it says, "This is very sad. The man that United States Magistrate Judge Smith sacrificed her career for is now double-crossing her." Writes Mr. Walsh, Thomas E. Walsh II, an attorney duly admitted to practice law in the courts of the state of New York, affirms the following to be true under penalties of perjury. Finally, I taught him that. But that means that this paper is just a routine paper. He's not going to tell any lies anyway. But the paper that he's going to tell lies, and he doesn't declare under penalty of perjury. Says Glendora, the interest of all of us is whether he's fit to practice in the United States District Court, Southern District of New York, and the United States Court of Appeals, Second Circuit, and the United States Supreme Court. And judging by, in reference to the above referenced, that's what he says, in reference to the above referenced, Glendora states he is not qualified to practice in any of them and go back to law school. Thomas Walsh's knowledge is hearsay. He was not there when it happened. He arrived on the scene 2 months later. Glendora opposes this motion. The motion for summary judgment must be dismissed for all the reasons stated in Glendora's 130-page objection. St. Patrick's Day, 60 days is more than enough time if this injustice should happen. Lisa Margaret Smith took 60 days plus 6 months. And this is page 4. Glendora says, what do you think of a lawyer, part-time judge who can't count? Thomas E. Walsh II does not paginate his papers. Now you got to be some kind of a special what not to paginate your papers. His paper received by Glendora on the vernal equinox. He has done this before, and Glendora has pointed it out to Judge Parker and to Magistrate Smith, and he still hasn't learned to hire a secretary who can count for him. He cannot count up to Walsh 2, but he can't count any pages. Says Glendora, the defendants don't know anything about it. This is more Walsh 2 lying and covering up. Why wouldn't Walsh 2 agree? Lisa Margaret Smith gave him everything Mr. Galvin asked her to. This is the only thing that wasn't handed to him on his full platter, one claim of my 6 claims. He has duped the court on such conclusory statements for months. Who is he to say? The issue is that Hofstadter et al. Violated the law first come, first served, that the Article 3 judge is there to enforce, that the magistrate was to do her job or gun discovery, that the truth should be revealed, that justice should be had. The failure so far is 100%. Also 100% is the failure of Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 1, just, speedy, and inexpensive. Selection of jurors, it says. The courts may permit the parties or their attorneys to conduct the examination of prospective jurors or may itself conduct the examination. In the latter event, the court shall permit the parties or their attorneys to supplement the examination by such further inquiries as it deems proper, or shall itself submit to the prospective jurors such additional questions. And a judge has to pick a jury that is not biased and not prejudiced. And how can a biased and prejudiced judge do that? That is Rule 47 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Lisa Margaret Smith robbed Glendora of her discovery. Thomas Walsh II lied and covered up. Lisa Margaret Smith helped him to do so. Lisa Margaret Smith swept under the rug Glendora's Rule 37 AB motion to do the discovery over and do it right and to impose sanctions. Why doesn't Mr. Walsh, too, earn an honest living? Why does he have to send his kids to college on tainted money, lying and covering up? United States Magistrate Judge Smith failed Congress and her country. What Walsh says is hackneyed. Come up with something respectful. Does Walsh, too, in fairness, quote Glendora's Judge Bryant victories of 1995, just affirmed February the 18th, 1997 this year in Sussman versus TCI? No. Let me stop here and paginate for Greenhorn Walsh, too. Glendora is on his page 3 with 2 to go. Walsh, too's arguments have been so vapid for 1 year, 7 months. He is what he told the Second Circuit he is, quote, a country lawyer. And we are up to page 9. Glendora does not believe Walsh, too, and a judge with any common sense would not believe it. Further, Diane Rainey's deposition left unanswered many questions that expose the said affidavit. Mr. Walsh deceives. The deposition was ruined by Mr. Walsh, too. He blocked the answers. The same is in violation of Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 37A and B. And where was Discovery Manager Lisa Margaret Smith on this motion? She was out to lunch for months. Super is not a substantial argument, as all of Mr. Walsh's arguments have been 1 year and 7 months. Mr. Walsh, too, skips right over Judge Smith's robbing Glendora of deposing her other defendants. The document discovery was neither deserving to be called document nor discovery. It was a fraud by defendants and Walsh, too, and a cover-up of the same by Smith. You know, I keep exposing these judges, and they're being dishonorable, but they don't reform. They go on, they're in a rut. They can't get themselves out of it. They go on doing these things that are against our country. We are on Mr. Walsh's unpaginated 4th page. 2 months ago, Judge Bryant lashed another country lawyer up in Albany for not knowing enough to paginate a so-called memorandum of law. The disclosure process was a fraud, says Glendora. It was lies and cover-ups, and an honest magistrate would have had it done over pursuant to Glendora's 37AB motion. The magistrate robbed Glendora of real discovery. What happened was phony discovery, a masquerade, a sham, and a mockery. Does not exist is conclusory. The Second Circuit says unless it appears beyond a doubt. Dishonestly, deceptively, as always, Thomas E. Walsh II runs away from the Second Circuit order. There is no reason to believe what Thomas Walsh says. Here we have another lying judge, West Haverstraw. And folks, we are up to page 10. And this was Glendora's objections to Thomas Walsh's objections to Lisa Margaret Smith. Our folks, Katy cat with the copper spots. What a nice kitty Katy cat is. You haven't seen her for a long time, have you? No. A reporter interviewed a 100-year-old woman, and he said, well, that was wonderful. He says, I hope to be back to see you next year. And she says, why not? You look healthy. And Bob says that he's got young blood. The trouble is, it's in an old container. And Joanna said that she just turned 36, and her mother-in-law says, right, before she turned it, she was 63. We are reporting to you on the law-breaking of Cablevision, Dolan, Todd, and Quim. The annual meeting is going to be June the 11th at 1997 at One Media Crossways in Woodbury. Cablevision hasn't got out an annual report. They haven't got out any quarterly reports. I don't see how they're still out of jail as far as the Security Exchange Commission goes. Now let's see, where do we have them? What is going on? Glendora shareholder versus the management the board of directors of Cablevision, the management, Charles Dolan, James Dolan, and the officers. And that's in the Eastern District of New York. And there's going to be a conference on that on June the 5th. I have filed a motion for default judgment in that they were served a summons on February 10th, and they haven't answered. They had 20 days to answer, and I called up to see who the lawyer was, and the answer was, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you. Not one person has got back to me. We called several offices, Charles Dolan, Lemley, Deitch. So we don't know where that stands. Well, it stands with a motion for default judgment. It went out in the middle of the week. And then we have Glendora versus Sullivan, and I have written a Rule 60B motion to Judge Corman, but it just sits there because the clerk, instead of sending Judge Corman the original signature, the clerk sent through the notice of appeal first. And so what will have to happen there is that certainly Judge Corman doesn't have jurisdiction until I make a motion to the United States Court of Appeals withdrawing the appeal without prejudice to renew it. And then give Judge Corman a chance to reconsider his decision of denying the informer properis when all the judges all around him have granted the informer properis. Certainly courts have to have some consistency. And then, of course, the conference that Judge Kagan, magistrate, scheduled will have to be canceled because Judge Corman dismissed the case. Then we have the derivative action, and that is going on right now. This is my appellant's brief. And the caption is rather large because the number of defendants, the number of people who violated the securities exchange law and did insider trading and earned about gained $2.5 million. That's why the defendants list is long, and why the lawyer list is long. Okay. This brief is due May 16th, and today is April 27. Says Glendora, argument. This deal was worth a whole lot more to us shareholders than $1 million. The deal was worth more like $2.5 million to the shareholders. It should have gone full swing, a jury trial. People had a right to know. It should not have been covered up with a hasty hush-hush settlement. It should have been brought before the shareholders at the annual meeting. The shareholders should have decided as to settlement or jury. You know, Cablevision called me up and asked me to withdraw this appeal. United States District Judge Sidney H. Stein is unequivocally justified in his vexation with Cablevision Systems Corporation management, that is, Dolan, Tata, Quinn et al., for ignoring Gwadzinski's informing them. Glendora has shown this court amply how ignorant and arrogant this management is. Poo-poo. We're cable TV operators. We don't know and we don't care. We're the Noble Riche of Long Island. We're the boss. Through no effort of their own, feels Judge Stein, Cablevision came into $850,000 and made out just fine, and it was a windfall. Page 2. This is some caption, Your Honors. All these people are versing one little shareholder, and that's what it says. That caption that I showed you, all those people, and down at the bottom it says, versus Glendora shareholder, appellant. The Cablevision annual meeting is June the 11th, 4 days before Appley's briefs. is due in your phalanges. Glendora will tell you about it in her reply brief. $400 per hour is a scandalous amount. Greedy lawyers are ruining our United States of America. $400 an hour. Glendora is grateful that Judge Stein reduced Mr. Wexler's fee from $400,000 to $250,000, but that's still too much. He was asking for something like $1,000 an hour. Glendora spoke at the settlement conference February 10, 1997 in Judge Stein's courtroom. The minutes tell about it. Did you read them? It was like a scene from The Merchant of Venice. No sooner had Sidney H. Stein awarded Mr. Wexler $250,000 instead of thank you, Mr. Wexler said, what about $2,650 disbursements? It oozed with such greed before God, Glendora was embarrassed for humanity. Glendora is destined to die poor. She prefers it. It's better to own your own soul. And $100 for lunch is this not another embarrassment for humanity before God? Glendora objects. The system still works. Something in America still works. The leverage of an IFP, that's informal paupers, poor person, pro se, holder of one share worth $30, cut $400,000 to $250,000, stop payment to Mr. Wexler and to Cablevision of $850,000, it poo-pooed. That is one story. The other is it brought the arrogant and ignorant Cablevision to their knees. Circa April 10th, Victoria Selhouse called Glendora and asked her to withdraw her appeal. That is the second story. Said Glendora, for what reasons? Said Selhouse, it would delay the payment to Cablevision. And said Glendora, and to Mr. Wexler? Well, yes. With whom did you talk this over? I really cannot say. This lying is infuriating. Did you talk it over with Charles Dolan? Well, I really can't say. Lawyer dishonesty is something this society can't take much more. It is denuding the courts of America of public trust. Cablevision, Dolan, Tata, Quinn, Old Glendora, $350 subpoena fees. When her trial of them was crookedly stayed, instead of returning the fees, they put them in the bank. Cablevision, Dolan, Tata, Quinn, and Robert Callaghy, Old Glendora, $120 for an audio tape they requested, were ordered 5 times to pay and never did. Cablevision, Dolan, Tata, Quinn, Old Glendora, $1,000 victory cost, Glendora versus Cofault Cablevision. New York Supreme Court, Westchester. Did Selhouse say anything about this when she asked Glendora to withdraw the appeal? No. It would not have succeeded anyway. The objection is on principles, and $10,000 would not have bought it. Now, so that one's just about written. There'll have to be 10 copies of that printed probably next weekend, and it will go out 2 weeks early. Quite a few of my appellant's briefs have gone out 2 weeks early. You just have to get them, work on them as soon as they come in, folks. The next day, start them, and keep at it until they're done. Try to do them as fast as possible. Send them out ahead so that make room for the next bunch that comes in of law breaking, lying, and covering up, and dishonorable judges. Bryant appeal is in the United States Court of Appeals for robbing Glendora of her trial the 3rd time. Do you think that they will handle that justly? Do you think that they will be true to their country? Or is it just all talk, trial by jury? Just all talk? There were only 17 telephone calls on last Friday night's program. The record is 44. We have Dolan, Todd, and Quinn. They're now out of the United States Supreme Court. They decided to stand up for, the United States Supreme Court decided to stand up for robbing a citizen of her right to trial by jury. That was on robbing Glendora the 1st time of her trial by jury. See, when Dolan, Todd, and Quinn actually were faced with the subpoenas to appear in court and testify, the telephone started to ring, the wheels started to churn, the money started to come out of the bank, and the right people in the right political party did their work, and the judge stayed the trial. Yonkers. What's the City Court of Yonkers doing? I haven't had any time, but why don't they send me a notice that they sent down the record on appeal to the appellate term, which is really a hopeless court. The appellate term is hopeless. It's hopeless to find injustice there. Hempstead franchise renewal. They had a meeting, 3-hour meeting on franchise renewal. Remember, we want our own public access channel. No more shared telecare. Cablevision on that. I'm tired of suing Cablevision. Look up New York Code Rules and Regulations, Title 9. It's called 9 NYC, standing for Code RR, not Railroad, Rules and Regulations, Section 595.4 and .1. Look it up. And look up what used to be New York Executive Law, Article 28, Section 893. 890-something, parenthesis 3. Anyway, it's now Public Service Law, 221, 225, etc., because they did away with the public service. They did away with the New York Cable Commission. Look that up and sue them. That's all you have to have. They broke a law, or they're breaking a law. They don't give us our own designated public access channel, and it's a law. Any cable company that has over 21 channels has to have a full-time designated public access channel. So go ahead and sue them for millions, and collect. Sue them in the Nassau County Supreme Court. We move on to Bruiser Ken. Last Tuesday, while I was editing in Hicksville, Franklin called the U.S. Attorney's Office in Garden City, and nobody's there, of course, just a recorder. Franklin left a message on the recorder that we had asked twice. We had placed a complaint twice against Kenneth H. Mildworm that he be arrested for criminal assault. He assaulted Glendora and he assaulted Franklin. And Glendora was seriously injured with bruises all over. And that Franklin, that this complaint had been ignored twice. And that we wanted them to file it a third time, and that Franklin left a very nice message and said that call me at so-and-so number, and if not, then I will call you. And so Franklin gets a frenetic telephone call from Jane Ann Murray saying that the prosecutor said that Franklin called his supervisor about filing a complaint, and Jane Ann Murray urged Franklin not to file that complaint. And Glendora said, but we have a right to file that complaint. Indeed you do, but it's going to fall on deaf ears, to which Glendora said, then somebody isn't doing his duty. So we went to White Plains U.S. Attorney on Wednesday, and you can't file the complaint in White Plains, that's the Southern District, because the incident, the beating up and the brutality occurred in the Eastern District at the Uniondale Brood House, United States Brood House. Then we called the Southern District down in Manhattan. It wasn't clear exactly what White Plains told us because nobody seemed to know what they were doing. And they wasted a lot of time, a couple of hours. So we called downtown in Manhattan, and we talked to her, Gloria Calabrese, and she made it quite clear that the complaint had to be filed at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the district where the incident happened. So that leaves Brooklyn or Uniondale. And I hope to file that complaint third time in Brooklyn or Uniondale sometime this week. And another thing that Jane Ann Murray said was that, well, be careful that you don't ask them too many times to file the complaint because of harassment. They might charge you with harassment. I just want to ask you something. Does this sound like extortion? Moving on, the next thing, of course, tomorrow we have a conference with Judge Azraq in Brooklyn, and I hope to bring you home an audio tape and play that for you. So the videotaping isn't going to close until that's resolved. Next thing we're working on is that we have a report that Kenneth H. Mildworm was in motorcycle 3 in Queens, that he was in an automobile accident, and then he got full disability. That means 3/4 of your pay. And yet he's working full-time in the United States courthouse. Well, how can the state and the city of New York, you taxpayers, be paying him for full disability when he's able to work full-time somewhere else? So we want to track that down. This is the brutality Kenneth H. Mildworm filed so far. It was a demented thing to do. Nobody in his right mind would have done that. And then you have all of this taxpayer waste covering up the fact that he did do it. I have no idea what's going on Glendora versus Bruzaken, which is a civil suit, where I sued him for $23 million along with the Pinkerton detective agency. And I hope to find out that tomorrow and report to you. And then here are the to-do lists of what has to be done against this transgressor of society who doesn't know how to live. Honorably and peacefully. Okay, that's one page. This is to-do list, okay? In general, yes. To talk to Murray about, to talk to Ramus, Assistant U.S. Attorney, about, to talk to Magistrate Azraq about. That's page 1. Here's page 2, what to do in the clerk's office. Here are other things to do. Here's miscellaneous. And what's this one over here? Well, what to do every day. And this continues over onto page 3. More in general. And more to talk to Judge Azraq about. And if the U.S. Attorney, Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District, doesn't do his job and take that complaint and prosecute it, then I think it's time to let Janet Reno know. And I think it's time to let President Clinton know. I think we'll stop for some jokes, okay? Betsy says she was named after Betsy Ross, and her buddy says they're not too long after either. And Ellen is shy about her age, and her mother-in-law says yes, about 18 years shy. And Bill says that his hometown has the lowest death rate of any town in the whole United States of America. Nobody wants to be caught dead there. Now, folks, it was Sunday night when I just talked to you. It's on videotape. And then Monday morning, April 28th, we got up at 4:30 a.m. and we started preparations to go to Brooklyn. And that meant getting dressed up and packing up all of the work to take and all of the papers take, and making the lunch, because we can't afford to eat out anywhere anyway. The lunch is better, you know what you're eating. And we left for Brooklyn at 6 o'clock to avoid the traffic jams. Again, it was raining. Thank God for rain, because water is a brilliant creation. It's two gases, hydrogen and oxygen, combined, and it makes a liquid. This is an amazing creation, and how could we go a day without it? So it was raining really very hard. And we left here at 6 o'clock and down the Bronx River and across county, down the Deegan, over the 2nd Avenue Bridge, 3rd Avenue Bridge. That's the way you go to Manhattan, you know, without paying a toll. And then down the FDR, and the traffic. At first I didn't think we gained much going so early to get rid of the traffic, but then they opened up after the 23rd Street and construction to the Brooklyn Bridge. And you get there and you get a parking space. So we sat with the car. You can't leave the car there because you're not supposed to park. So we stayed with the car, and then the street cleaner came. See, that always happens in Brooklyn. So the man that drives the car in front of the street cleaner comes and tells you to move the car. And so you move the car, and then they can sweep the street. And it is nice and clean. It's on Cadman Plaza. And then I worked on Bruiser Kent, and went over the things to say to Judge Azraq, and over the things to say to Jane Ann Murray, and over the things to say to Ramus, who is the assistant U.S. attorney. And poor Becky Carley came all the way from Hicksville. It took her 2.5 hours because of the traffic jam, 10 miles an hour on the BQE. And she's a soldier, she's a trooper, because she had little Joey with her, who was so cute. And the obstacles and the hard work that she had to do, and her loyalty and to the cause, are splendid. A true American. And Judge Azraq came out, and she had on a little checkered dress, $1 million, and who robbed us of public access in White Plains, in Westchester, the 18 communities that QCI supposedly covers. Robbed us of public access, which was $120,000 expense to him, and he went to his grave worth $900 million. He went to his grave very soon after the ghoulish Halloween night that he robbed us of public access at the White Plains studio. You know, folks, these things always have a way of winning. Do you notice that? Now, this is the, I haven't even had time to, this file should have, gone into another file. Look at the size of it. Maybe 2 other files. But it's certainly... I will set trial date, will be for the trial date.